Okay. So thank you everyone for coming back and enjoying Swamiji's discourses and presence. It's been really a great weekend. And today's discourse is on infinite freedom in a finite world. So.
Infinite freedom in a finite world. Can you all hear?
Yes.
Okay. I think maybe we can put it around the other way. Finite freedom in an infinite world. It would be just, I mean, that is the situation right now. Finite freedom in an infinite world is what actually is happening. I mean, the world, as far as we're concerned, is infinite. No one has found any boundaries. They thought that when they sent this, I think it was called the Hubble telescope out into outer space beyond the level of the Earth's atmosphere, that they would find, as they looked at the planets and not planets, I mean, as they looked at the galaxies out in the universe, that they would find some decrease, some diminution, because they had thought that the Earth's atmosphere, the Earth-based telescopes, could be expected not to see that clearly. But a telescope beyond the reach of the Earth's atmosphere should surely be able to see, to show much more clearly what was going on in this intergalactic space. And we would expect to find that the number of galaxies would slowly decrease. There would be some diminution somewhere. But they found nothing of the sort. As far as you go, as far as the eye can see, nothing but galaxies and more galaxies. There was not the slightest indication that the universe was bounded in some way. So in a physical sense, it's an infinite universe as far as we can tell. We've had no indications of any finiteness to it. So, but our present situation is finite freedom. We are free in a certain sense. We are free in a certain way, under certain conditions, under certain restrictions, we are free. But there is always a limitation. There seems to be always a limitation. We're not really free. We always seem to encounter a boundary, a limit. If it's not a physical limit, it's a psychological limit. That what we hope, what we ourselves imagine ourselves to be, as of course everyone has a basic idea of their own, their own glory, their own, we have a feeling of that we have a certain achieved, or we have within us a certain reality. And so we feel, though we're confined in a physical way to this planet, we do feel psychologically that there is freedom. But in every other sense, we seem to be limited. We can only go so far and not any farther. We always come up against some boundary, either physical boundaries, intellectual boundaries, psychological boundaries. We always come up against boundaries. Life itself is a boundary. We came a certain number of years ago, and we're developing and increasing and growing, and so forth, but after a certain length of time, we know we're all going to majestically march off the plane of this universe. That is guaranteed. That so far in the 4 billion years or so of this earth, no one has managed to live beyond, say, 130 years or something like that. I think the oldest person was some man in some country in the around the Caspian Sea. That's supposed to be the area of longevity in the Caucasus, not the Caucasus, the Caspian
Hanzu.
Sea, huh?
Hanzu's tribe or race.
No, it's somewhere around I don't know that area.
Caspian Sea.
Anyway, 133 years. That is the greatest. That's all. Now, beyond that, no one has ever managed to live. Well, I don't know. Methuselah was supposed to live 800 years. Okay, but the Earth is 4 billion years old, so 800 is not much.
There are sannyasis in the Himalayas, I have been told. They are there for many years.
Maybe, maybe not. So, we are told about that, but only so far, even in Hindu philosophy, I think there's 6 Chiranjeevis, 6 people who live forever. I think Hanuman and others. Anyway, they're 6. Okay, they're still alive, but we haven't reached that status, so there's no sense to worry about it. So we feel very finite. We feel very constrained. We feel very limited, and the question is, what is this life for? What did we come here to do? What are we supposed to accomplish? We've only got a short period of time compared to 4 billion years, even, 90, 100, 200 years is nothing. So what are we supposed to accomplish in this short period of time? What did we come here to do? Was there a purpose to this? We wake up one day and find ourselves here, and some other day we're gone. So what was this performance for? So this is the basic question of life. What is the meaning? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Now, that's on one side. On the other side, we have those who have realized that this physical existence is only the surface of an ocean, and that within that physical reality, interpenetrating that physical reality, there is a spiritual entity. There is something else which we don't know about. We know about the body. We've investigated the body with great thoroughness, and we know how to take care of the body to a great extent. Not fully, certain things are still being developed, no doubt, but at least we know a great deal about how to take care of the physical envelope. Psychologically, we understand so many things about human psychology, the functions of the brain and all that, functions of the personality, dealing with psychological problems. We know so many things. If that's all there is to human life, then things are very limited indeed. Then this life becomes extremely significant, because that's the only thing that we're conscious of, and there's nothing else. We don't have another opportunity. This is our only opportunity. Then we become very desperate. But there have been people on this earth who have, in their own experience, discovered that this physical status of things is really only a very insignificant detail in a much, much longer, much greater story. It has been discovered that within this personality, within the physical frame, within the psychology, within the mind, there is another entity which is not known to the body and to the mind. And it is something that is boundless. Nobody has ever found any limit to it. It is limitless, and it contains all the positive virtues that we find to be supreme in our lives. It's infinite beauty, infinite joy, infinite satisfaction, infinite fulfillment. That is how that entity is described. Now the question is that real or is that an imagination? Is that wishful thinking? This is what we would like to see. We would like to experience that these things are true, but do we have anything more than that? Is there any evidence that such a thing exists? That is the fundamental question of our life. People who are not interested in the ultimate condition of human existence, they won't worry about that. They will want to have a successful life now. They will want to have all the resources, all the physical things become very important. Intellectual things become very important. Even artistic things become very important, because this is all there is. They don't know anything before and they don't know anything after. So that is one type of reaction to the human predicament. But there's a further emphasis, there's a further understanding that can be reached, that behind this body and mind, behind the body, behind the mind, there is another entity which is called the soul or the spirit, which is called the infinite, the eternal, which is called God, which is called Brahman. It's given so many different names. But the role, there are few people on this earth who have discovered, who have over the millennia of the past discovered that there is really something beyond what we normally experience. And they put that forward as a postulate to be verified. Don't take our word for it, you can discover it yourself. That is the promise. And so those people, those of us who are interested in an answer to the fundamental questions of life, is there something beyond what we experience? Something beyond the body and the mind which we understand? Is there another entity? Is there a soul? Is there a reality that never came into existence because it was always existing, and it never disappears, it never decays and passes away? Is there such a thing? That is the most important question in life. Everything else is definitely subsidiary, because everything else is going to pass away when we die. It's not going to be, it has a beginning and will have an end. But there is this one question: is there something here within our experience which has never come into existence, which always was there, and which will never die, which will never pass away? And what are its characteristics? So the people who have done experiments on physical reality are called scientists, physicists, biologists, chemists, and all that, that's fine. The people who try to answer that question are the spiritual people. They will be the prophets in the Old Testament. They speak of so many prophets. They will be the great teachers like Jesus, Buddha, Sri Ramakrishna, the great, there are many such. These are just a few of the names, but there are many such who have discovered in amidst the finite world that we're surrounded with, they have discovered an infinite reality of infinite purity, perfection, holiness, peace, love, joy. Infinite joy is called Satchidananda. It is infinite existence, infinite consciousness, infinite joy. They have discovered that. Now, don't take it just as something that you have to believe and accept. In some spiritual traditions, they say if you accept that truth, that's all you have to do. Accept this as the source of your reality of your life. That's all you need to do. But in general, much more is required. In general, we have to analyze it. We have to try to obtain evidence that this is really true, that this is really existent, that there is such a thing. How can you prove that God exists, or spirituality exists, or that infinite consciousness and joy that is called Brahman or Atman, that exists? This takes a whole different procedure. But those who have done it, they testify to the fact that this is real. There is such a thing. Scientists testify to the reality of the physical and intellectual worlds. They have done the experiments. How do you know that H2O is water, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen is water? Have you done it? No. None of us here anyway have done it. Why do we accept it? Why do we accept that this is true? Because somebody has done it, somebody who has been trained, and we accept the fact that by training, by discipline, we can discover the truths of the microscopic, of the natural world, which are not accessible to our ordinary senses. We accept without blinking an eye the fact that everything is made up of atoms. Atoms, molecules, and all of that. We accept that. What reason have we got to accept that? We have not the slightest idea. Everything you look at, you don't see any molecules, atoms, or anything. But we repeat that very, very wisely. Yes, this is what it is. But we have no way of proving it, because we haven't trained ourselves to do that. Those people who have trained themselves, who've studied, who've done the experiments, who've built the machines to do this research, they have come up with certain results, and other people have verified those results, and still other people have verified them. It's been verified in different experiments, and so we accept that this is true. This is all atoms. Do we see any of these things? No. Not the slightest. We don't have the faintest idea of it. But we accept that people who have qualified themselves to make these experiments have discovered this to be true, and we act accordingly. And by acting accordingly, we're able to live in this world. Now, in the same sense, there are people who have purified their understanding, purified their whole experience, their whole life in such a way that their mind has been able to perceive the reality of that entity that normally we don't perceive at all. So, in the same sense that we accept that everything is made up of atoms, in that same sense, in that same way, and for that same reason, we are presented with the idea that this whole universe is pervaded by a spiritual reality. That reality is without beginning and without end. There's been no indication that this will ever end. And the knowers of Brahman who have experienced this have found themselves in a realm where there was no question of beginning or end. They have experienced these things to be so. Now, that still doesn't mean that we have to accept it. We can do our own experiments. We're invited to do our own experiments by using the techniques that they recommend for doing it, just like scientists have certain recommended. You have to build a particle accelerator that has a circumference of something like 4 miles. In Switzerland, near Geneva, they have a machine like that. I think it's CERN, yes. It's got like maybe the diameter of this particle accelerator is like 1/2 mile or maybe 1 mile, and the circumference is a number of miles. So that's what you have to do to verify the existence of this physical world. The fact that, you know, these not only atoms, but that the atoms themselves are composed of smaller entities called protons, neutrons, electrons, and those are composed of still further entities called quarks and this and that. We repeat that like parrots. We repeat it. Yes, 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 that is true, but we have no proof of it. To have the proof, you have to go to that accelerator, several miles in circumference. You have to do experiments with a huge variety of detectors to you have to do impossible experiments that nobody could ever possibly do, but we accept it, that this is so. Spirituality is by no means as complicated as that. All you need is your own mind and willingness to undertake training of the mind. If you want to study some very abstruse subject, you also have to undergo training of the mind. In spirituality, that same thing has to be done. You have to undergo training of the mind. By purifying the mind, that is to say, by making it concentrated, by concentrating it, by being devoted to the spiritual quest alone, having a purity of intention, having purity of life. They give you certain methods that are by no means as complicated as the methods to prove, you know, the cyclotron, or what do they call it, the particle accelerator that's several miles in circumference. You don't have to build anything like that. And a whole room full of abstruse equipment to verify this, and you get all these people, when they do their experiments, they get their results in a very indirect way, little blips. These are dangerous instruments. What did I do?
No, you didn't do anything.
I thought I struck this. Maybe I struck it.
Maybe I left, that's why.
Oh, now we have the question.
No.
So the point is that the proof required for this spirit, for the existence of this spiritual reality, is by no means anywhere near as complicated as that. It doesn't require, 10 years of training as a physicist, and then even then you're trained either as an experimentalist or as a theorist, and no theorist will be very good at experiments, and no experimentalist will be very good at theory, but somehow they believe each other. The theorists believe that the experimentalists have found certain things, even though themselves they might not be able to actually verify it. The experimentalists believe that some of their results have now been correlated into a system of particles and this and that, even though they themselves might not be able to do the calculations to verify it. Everything is built on trust. I believe certain people have done certain experiments, and so I go on that basis and I accept the results of it. In spiritual life, the same thing is to be done. You see, we have people who have done these experiments. People are like Sri Ramakrishna, like the Holy Mother, like Swami Vedananda. They have done all these experiments in their own lives. They have realized that truth. They have achieved a state of awareness which reveals the presence of a reality that is eternal, that was never brought into existence. It was always there. It can never be destroyed. It is the basis of everything. It is the foundation of the universe. It's the foundation of every experience. They have found such a thing. And all they ask, they don't ask anything of us. They say, if you accept it, fine. If you don't accept it, it's also okay. No problem. But if you have any difficulty, if you're asking basic questions of life, why am I suffering like this if you are suffering? Why am I being so utterly joyful if everything seems to turn to joy? What will happen? Certainly I will die. Everyone is bound, everyone that was born is bound for that ultimate end. The body will die. What happens afterwards? That is the basis of the Kathopanishad. This is the only question this Upanishad asks. In the beginning, Nachiketas asks this question. When a person has died, some people say that person still exists. Other people say no, that person no longer exists. What is the truth? That is the only question that's asked in the Upanishad. And that's really the only question in our life. We're not really interested as far as fundamental thought, fundamental questions are concerned. We're not really interested in anything else. Because everyone has in the back of their mind the idea this is temporary. My great-great-great-grandparents have died back to the 14th generation. They've all died. And my great-grandparents may have died. My grandparents may still be there, but eventually I know they will disappear. And I myself eventually will disappear. Can I live without knowing anything more than that? I cannot. This life is based upon the answer to those questions. How should I live? How should I conduct myself? What is the meaning of all of this? Those are the fundamental questions, without which really it's not, we have to face up to these questions if we want that peace of mind. Of course we can go along, ignore it, okay, we march off the face of this earth, everything's fine. But thinking people cannot tolerate that. They demand some answers. And the answers have been given in all the spiritual traditions of the world. These answers have been given. There have been people who have found that there is a reality here which may not have a name or may be given a name. But there is a reality here which has never come into existence and will never decay. And it is in order to fulfill our life, we have to look into that question. And we have to train ourselves to try to see the answer to that question. And what is that training? That training is basically a training of the mind, because the mind, we have only two instruments, the mind and the body. And it's the mind that controls controls our hopes and aspirations, our dreams. The body basically is insensitive. It is the mind that guides all of this. So how do we train the mind to perceive that reality which is the foundation of everything? And the basic training is to study those records of these great people who have achieved an answer to these questions, who feel that they have achieved an answer to these questions, and we now have to prove for ourselves whether or not that answer is satisfactory for us. That is our job, that is our only real job in this world. Other jobs such as earning a living and raising a family and taking part in civic enterprises and being helpful to others and all of that, they are used they just form the building blocks of that basic urge. They're necessary and essential, but what drives it all is the answer of this question that Nachiketas asks in the Katha Upanishad. What happens after all this? Is this limited existence everything? So then they provide these methods. These are the yogas: Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Different methods of investigation, different scientific pursuits to achieve the answer. And what is the answer that has been arrived at is that those things that appear to us, the appearance, what seems to be, what is available to our senses, of sight, hearing, and all the natural senses, that is one reality. But there's another reality that is attained by quieting the mind, by controlling the mind, by controlling the passions, by controlling the inner organ, which is the mind, the intellect. By controlling that, we're able to understand something. And how is it that we're able to understand it? When we can quiet the mind, we're able to see what is within the mind. Just as when you quieten the surface of a lake, if the water is very clear, you can see everything on the bottom. When the wind is blowing across the surface of the lake, you don't see the bottom at all. You only see what's reflected off the surface. So our normal mental experience is only on the surface of things. When we can quieten the mind through yoga, through meditation, through devotion, through karma yoga, each yoga has its own way of approaching this. When we can quieten the mind, we perceive something within the mind, which is the reality first of all we find what is that thing that is perceived. It is infinite, it is boundless, it does not decay, it does not disappear, and it has never come into existence. It's the foundation of everything. So this is the general plan of our effort. This is the general procedure that we want to follow in order to realize that thing here, without which everything seems to be shallow and superficial. Because when we find that the bottom, the support, the substance of all these finite things, we find that substance is infinite and eternal. It does not come into existence, it will not disappear. And it actually is the reality of everything. It is found that this this variegated universe, really in that ultimate state is not seen at all. What is seen ultimately is only that reality, that it is like seeing the one thing what is that one thing that is the support of everything? It's like, it's usually seen as this a motion picture projected on a screen. What is the reality of the motion picture? Has nothing to do with the pictures. Pictures may show a boat going over Niagara Falls and you feel, the best thing is a roller coaster. They show a roller coaster in the movie, the roller coaster, you're in a roller coaster, you're heading straight toward a pool of water at the bottom of the roller coaster, and you come back out and people in the movie theater scream. They're sitting in a chair, there's nothing's going to happen to them, but they scream because they think they're going to be destroyed as they go down into that water. But when you turn on the light, you find none of this has taken place at all. It seemed real, but it was only an appearance. It was a play of light on a screen. What really was there, the essence of what you were looking at, was only a piece of cloth, the theater screen. And what was on the screen, which is what was causing you so much agitation, it was only a play of light, had no substance, no significance at all. It was only for amusement, it was for entertainment. In the same sense, everything in this world is for our amusement and our entertainment and for our practice of trying to realize that essence. That is the meaning of everything that happens. It's our way of practicing, our way of trying to understand what it is that is at the back of everything, that moves everything, that is the essence of everything. But the reality has nothing to do with any of these things. The reality is all present, all pervading, like the screen, which shows the variety of objects on it, but itself is never affected by any of these objects. So Brahman, that reality, that consciousness, is never affected by any of the things that we perceive or that happen, that occur in this world. And it is entirely independent. Those things that occur and happen, they come and they go, they appear and they disappear, but the reality never changes at all. So then the question comes, how do we realize those things? How do we actually make these experiments? Are we going to have to in order to do experiments in physics, we need at least 10 years in university. And then you have to go into a laboratory and start as an apprentice to learn all these techniques, either a laboratory for actually doing the experiments or a theoretical institute where you have to learn some very sophisticated mathematical tools in order to analyze the results of the experiment. We're never willing to object to undergoing this training. Or if you want to be a doctor, you have 4 years of medical school, then you may have 3 years or so of specialty training, And within that specialty, you'll probably have another 2 or 3 years of further specialty training to get to learn to go to the very end of the techniques that are used. So you've spent something like maybe 13, 14 years of training in order to be able to perform open heart surgery. And really see, well, what's inside this, the heart? Let's see, what is it? What is it? And interior decorating, it's called, how to do the various things that you do in order to make the heart work better. We don't mind that. But when we're saying, okay, it's going to take a number of years of spiritual practice in order to be able to concentrate on this reality, to be able to get us even indications of, that this is going to lead to the proper conclusion that I'm looking for, that to see that one reality that's the basis of everything. If we ask that we spend some years in practice for that, then we object, oh, that's too long. I want to know right now. I want to know the answer immediately. So, but that's not reasonable. It's by undertaking this sadhana, undertaking this spiritual practice, that we prepare ourselves for that. And we prepare ourselves to appreciate and understand that. But that is not the whole picture. Even without the slightest preparation of any sort, that we can get at least a glimpse of that reality right now. Everyone can get a glimpse of that reality right now if there are just a few simple exercises can be done, and we can get a little taste. That's why there are these 4 yogas. Just by starting on this path, frequently we do get a little glimpse. Even from the beginning, we can get a little glimpse of that there's truth here. You may not get all the bells and whistles of the a final realization that is described by Sri Ramakrishna. He sometimes describes that you may not be able to get the the full result of that, the full validation that you're asking for, but you can see something inside. You can experience something, even with very little training, very little concentration, very little, just at the beginning, you can get an indication that there is truth here. You may not get all the realizations that are talked about in the scriptures, but that the fact that that there's a reality here, there's a spiritual entity here, there is something here which underlies the appearance, the surface, that underlies the surface of things. The fact that there is such a thing, one can obtain even with very little effort, just an indication that this is true. It's like Sri Ramakrishna talks about a person who's fishing. There may be fish in this water, you don't know. You're fishing and you may stand there for a long time watching that float on the surface. But when you see it suddenly jiggle, you know there's a fish there. But you haven't got it yet, you haven't caught it yet, it may be too clever for you, it may get away again and all of that. All this may be true, but you've seen the wiggle, so you know there are fish in this lake. So it is like that. Even a small amount of effort, it says in one of our scriptures, Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Swalpa, su, alpa. Alpa means very small. Swalpa means very, very small. Swalpam api, in fact being, swalpam apyasya dharmasya, this even a little bit of this particular dharma, this particular method of spiritual realization, even a little bit of this trayate protects us, mahato bhayat, from great fear. Even a little bit of this. You don't have to be very advanced, or who is advanced, who is not advanced. If you have a race course which is infinitely long, who is very far ahead? Even if someone is miles ahead of you, the race course is in an infinite distance. Even miles are nothing compared to infinity. So who is it? Even the greatest souls, Swami Vedananda implied this, even the greatest souls basically are on that same track that we're on. And it's an infinite track, so who is ahead of whom? There was once a discussion between Swami Vedananda, who was one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples. He was he was a son of a sheep herder, a very humble background, and Swami Vedananda, the great world-famous teacher. And someone asked Swami Vedananda when he was later in Varanasi, Maharaj, you have realized, you have had Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is the highest state of realization that's mentioned in the scriptures. You've had Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Swamiji has had Swami Vedananda has had Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So, what is the difference between you and him? So Swami Vedananda said, oh, you fool, you don't understand. It's all a race in infinity. That is the point. If the course is infinitely long, someone else is 10,000 miles ahead of you, they're still an infinite distance from the goal, and you're also an infinite distance from the goal. So basically, there's not that much difference. Relatively speaking, yes, you can say. But it is all a race in infinity, so one should never feel, and many people do tend to feel that, and it is highly regrettable. Many people feel, oh, I'm just a simple person, I cannot attain these heights, I'm just something very preliminary. That is totally wrong, that's totally mistaken conception. Each one of us could, this very moment, have the full realization. And we should feel that way. This moment we can realize that truth. There's no, oh yes, I'm just a householder. How often do we hear that? I'm just a householder, I'm worried about my family and about my income and about my this and about my that. Yes, that's true. Okay, but then the sadhu in the Himalayas, he's worried about his bhiksha, you see. And his bhiksha is, if he doesn't get it, he gets nothing. You see, if you don't get one of the many things you're working on, that's okay, I'll manage somehow. So his situation is worse than yours. You see, so one should never feel this, that, oh, I'm nothing, so often we hear this, I'm just a simple person. No, yes, you're just a simple person, but everyone is a simple person. The difference between people, you see, even if, when you're talking about, all of us being at one level, starting out as very small, yeah, one is bigger than another, okay, yeah, there's a little difference there. But what are we after? We're after the infinite, in which any finite distance is still infinitely less than infinity. If this is you say your distance, your size is this small, And maybe my size is this small, and somebody else's the size is still larger. All of us are minute compared to that infinity. That infinity is far, far in excess of any of these things. So we should never have the idea, oh, I'm just a simple person, I can't realize these things. This very moment I can realize that I am the infinite and the eternal. This very moment I can realize it. Not only can I realize that in theory, but actually in practice, that a very strong conviction can come, or an experience of the surroundings as being an infinite reservoir within which the finite is perceived. In other words, to feel ourselves to be an infinite reservoir within which the finite is perceived. That is possible for any of us, anytime. And that's all we need, because then we know. You know, like you're looking for, you've found that there's some animal has entered your house, and you don't know, you've heard these sounds, and so you look all around. Where is it? Where is it? You examine it, lift up this, and look into that. You don't feel. Then suddenly, out of the corner of your eye, you see the end of a tail go. That's all you need. Even the faintest perception of anything spiritual is enough. That is the same thing as perceiving the whole of the infinite. Whether you perceive the tail of that animal, just a little flick of that tail, you've perceived the whole animal. So a little indication of God's presence, a little indication of God's grace, which most of us have had, most of us who yearn for that realization, most of us, some little thing has come. That is the same thing as the infinite, the totality. So one should never feel, this is fine for people who are sadhus in the Himalayas, was able to spend their time in deep concentration in the caves of the Himalayas. They can experience. For us, we have to be content with these little things. No, not at all true. Very, very, it's very unfortunate that these ideas come to us. I am the infinite and the eternal. That is the conviction we have to have, that my real nature has not come into being and will not die. I haven't experienced it yet, but if I concentrate on it, I will get little indications of it. After all, how could it be? Could it really be true that something which is at the core of our being, which is the reality of our nature, which is the essence of everything around us, should not be perceptible at all? Can such a thing be, can one really support such an idea? So the basic thing is we have to have a desire for that. So Sri Ramakrishna put a great emphasis on the idea of yearning. Yearning is the key to realization. To really want to know. Swami Vivekananda, before he took the name Vivekananda, he took various names, Sanskrit names. One name that he took just before he assumed the name Vivekananda was Vividishananda. Vividisha means, vid is to know, Vividisha is the desiderative form of that word in Sanskrit, meaning desire to know. And so Vividishananda is that as a person who desires to experience that ananda, that bliss. So the Maharaja of Khetri, of all people, who was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda and was a very very remarkable Raja. He was the prince in charge of the state of Khetri near Delhi. And he asked Swamiji Swamiji was called Vividishananda. He asked him to drop that name and take the name Vivekananda. He said, your Vividisha has already, Vividisha, desire to know, has already fructified. You already know. So why should you keep that name? Then he gave him the name Vivekananda. Then Swamiji accepted that. There's another thing that the Maharaja of Khetri taught Swamiji. When Swamiji left, was getting ready to leave for America, the Maharaja helped him, the devotees in Chennai raised the money, and then Swamiji said, no, if it's really God's will, I shall simply give that money away, that money will come back. Let us do that. And so they gave all the money away, and then it came back. Anyway, but the Maharaja of Khetri raised money to send Swamiji to, give some additional funds, addition to what Chennai devotees collected, to, improve his trip to America. Also, the Maharaja gave rupees, several hundred rupees to his mother. Swamiji was always concerned about his mother. And but anyway, the Maharaja Khetri gave him one additional, you could say, made it possible for him to learn one additional thing. How could he teach Swamiji anything? Swamiji had realized Brahman. When Swamiji came to Khetri on his way to Bombay to take the ship, there was a nautch girl, a dancing girl. She was asked to give a performance. See, it was the Maharaja has just had a son, an heir to the throne, and of course in royal families it's absolutely essential that there be an heir to the throne, otherwise the whole kingdom is thrown into disarray. So a son had been born to him after a great deal of yearning for that. So there was a big celebration. And Swamiji was just passing through on his way to Bombay for catching the steamer to America. And this nautch girl, this dancing girl, was not thought to be very, in polite society she was definitely considered very low and was looked down upon. But she inquired whether Swamiji would be attending her songs. And Swamiji said, no, I'm a monk. I don't listen to women singing. So he said, no, he's not going to come. So then she sang, but he could hear, his room was near the place where the performance was going to take place. One of the songs was, look not upon my evil qualities, make of us both the same Brahman. One piece of iron is the knife in the hand of the butcher. He's going to kill an animal. Another piece of iron is used as a lamp in a temple. But when the magic, there's this magic stone which is supposed to turn iron into gold. When both the knife of the butcher and the arati lamp in the temple are touched with that, they both turn to gold. So don't see my evil qualities. You and I are both that same Brahman.
Maybe I'm going to do that.
Yes, it's a very beautiful song.
Forest
Very
for
good song.
forest for
Yeah, very Abdul.
And then she gave various other examples. One pool of water is from a roadside ditch. And if you've seen some of these roadside ditches, you will understand it's not just where water is drained, it's where everything else goes also. One amount of water is taken from that ditch. Another water is the holy water in the temple that has been offered to God. But when both of those go into the Ganga, they both become holy. You see? So don't look upon my evil qualities. We are both the same Brahman. You may appear like this, a very holy sannyasi, and I'm just a wretched singer here who, of doubtful reputation. But the interior, the essence of us both is the same Brahman. Like that. She had another 3 different examples, but each one of us is that full Brahman, fully realized, fully manifested. And the fact that you say, well, I'm just a family person, I know this, I'm busy about this, busy about that. And then but in the Himalayas you have these holy sadhus who spend their whole time in contemplation, and they can achieve realizations. What can I achieve? That should not be the case. All of us are Brahman. Every one of us is that realization in full already now. Without exception, without ifs, ands, and buts, there's nothing that can be said. Sarvam khalu idam Brahma. All of this indeed is Brahman. That's the conclusion of the Upanishads. So we should never feel that this is something that's very high for us to reach, something that only people in monasteries and convents can manage to have any approach to. No, that full realization, not only is it available to each one of us, but we actually know it inside our own consciousness. We already know that there is something undying, eternal within us. We already know that when we hear it, like this in a scripture or in a talk, when we hear about it, why is it that we respond? We respond because it appeals to us as being something we always imagined, we always thought about, we always understood, but we never were able to phrase it. So when the scriptures point this out to us, we instinctively react. Yes, I feel this to be true. And that is the point about feeling the presence of God. If you feel the presence of God, and devote yourself to some, with some concentration to feeling that God is present within. God being either Brahman or an incarnation, Sri Ramakrishna, Buddha, Shiva, Divine Mother, any such entity. Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati, from the Upanishad, the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. And so anyone who has experienced that reality knows that this is the essence, that is the essence right now. So for each one of us, inside each one of us right now, we're actually somewhat conscious of it. If we were not conscious of it, you wouldn't sit here and listen to me. You would say, oh, this man what is he doing? It's all exaggeration, it's all his imagination. No, but you feel a response. Because you know, you understand inside you is a core of undying truth and undying reality that is inside each one of us. So the feeling that that exists and the concentration during meditation, the concentration on that feeling, that God, you can represent it as your chosen ideal, some form of God, some prophet, some holy incarnation. Feel that can be in that form, but you feel that presence within. Right now it can be done by anyone. And if you do it, and if you feel just one tiny little bit of it, you will get so much confidence, so much joy, so much understanding and wisdom will come from that you will be utterly amazed. And those who have managed to experience even a little bit of that, they will bear out the truth of it, that you don't have to have all the bells and whistles. Eventually, yes, that's what we want. We want all the bells and whistles. But now, even just a slight feeling of the truth and the reality that God is present inside each one of us, that is, that will give such support, such confidence that we can then go on and practice our meditation, our spiritual practices in all these different ways, all the different yogas. We can practice those things and continue and then grow in that. But the fact that this is the truth within us, we can feel that right now. Hari Om.